Thank you, everybody, for showing up, because I know 8 a.m. at a conference is like 4 a.m. any other day. I basically have to swallow the mic to talk. I'm going to do my best. So yes, this is Making Your Magic Matter, and I am Clark R. Rowenson. How many of you were at my talk yesterday? Most of you. Okay, so I'm going to gloss through a bit of the stuff about who I am. You'll just have to trust everybody else that you can trust me. I am an author, a writing coach, and just a general magic system nut job. Reason I do a lot of this, it gets really weird because people will, especially on YouTube, will demand proof in terms of my fiction. I'm focusing on my nonfiction. If it doesn't make sense to you, ignore me. Because my entire goal is to get more and better magic systems in fiction. Doesn't have to be my magic, doesn't have to be my stories. Before we can really get into everything else, we want to make sure we talk about why we need to make our magic matter. And I'm going to be pausing a lot for water. So, if our magic, I think I'm getting ahead of myself, hang on. Okay. The magic can do so much for us and our stories. This is probably going to come up in a later slide because even though I reviewed it, things are not holding in the brain today. Magic can deepen people's connections to our characters, to our world, make things interesting. And I am getting ahead of myself because for this to make sense, let's talk about what magic actually is. And then it'll start to click. So my definition of magic is anything enabling effects or abilities beyond our capability or understanding. So that inherently includes advanced tech, astrological phenomenon, demonology, standard magic, anything you can think of. Basically, it is what makes our fiction fantastical, and it can fit into any genre except the genres that are adamantly non-fantastical. So contemporary fiction, nothing against it. The point of it is to be real world. It's kind of hard to put magic in there. Not to say you can't, but. So a magic system simply is a set of facts, patterns, and principles that frame the magic and make it understandable to the audience and to the users, to the magic users. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be as simple as I push a button or I pull a trigger, or it can be complicated as Newtonian and even quantum physics. It's all up to you, what you want to do, and what your story needs. So back to why we want it to matter. When magic matters, it can make our stories and our worlds truly unique. Man, I can't even do inflection. This sucks. It can help us take ephemeral concepts and turn them into something much more visceral and tactile for our readers. It can pull them in ways that almost nothing else can. We can empathize with characters. We can see the world. Magic is a stronger, an additional magnet. Magic is what makes us like walk and ride the speeder bikes through the trees of Endor. It's what lets us fly alongside Iron Man. It is what lets us train as a warrior of the Fire Nation. It is that part that pulls you in and does not let you go. At least that's what it does for me. So when we get it right and we make it matter, magic can deliver everything we want to our audience. It's a big if, but that's okay. When it's done right, has anybody not seen a Marvel movie? Good, as it should be. So Marvel is a great example of it done right. The magic in each of them, the powers of the people, what's going on, is integral to the characters, their development, the setting, the plot, the theme. It is so deeply woven that you can't separate the magic from any of those stories. Like, the stories are compelling on their own. Black Panther, intensely compelling on its own. But then you add in the powers of the Black Panther and the heart-shaped flower. I think it was flower. Flower or fruit? It's a flower. Okay. The heart-shaped flower. You add that in, and it amplifies some of that. Increases the risks, increases the stakes, increases the rewards, and increases the symbolism as he goes through different stages of his journey. Just, oh man, Black Panther, so good. And then there's Babadook. Who has seen the Babadook? Okay, shame on you guys. I suppose if you don't like horror, that's understandable. I do highly recommend it, though. When I said that it can take esoteric concepts and make it tangible and tactile, this is what I'm talking about. The Babadook is about a mother who lost her husband. She's a solo mother, and she is going through a long, unhealthy grieving process, and so is her son. And the monster, the Babadook, is a manifestation of that grief and that process, and is one of the best metaphors for mental health I have ever seen in a movie. It's fantastic. And it takes this experience. I will try and manage my plosives, sorry. It takes that experience of this mother and lets you see the horror and the degradation and the uncertainty that she goes through and her son goes through in a way that I could not have experienced otherwise. That's what happens when you do it right. And it's not just fantasy, it's not just sci-fi, we've got it in horror. Now I might make some people mad. This is my opinion. And I'm not saying you can't enjoy your stuff. Heroes was very popular for a very long time. I couldn't make it through the first season. It felt just like a character drama where they slapped the powers on top. It didn't feel deeply connected to me. They tried, but it didn't hold fast, and they focused so much more on, and this might be a personal thing, they focused so much more on the drama than the magic, that the magic didn't ever really feel like it mattered beyond being a simple MacGuffin of we have to protect the cheerleader because reasons. Yes, she's invincible, and like MacGuffin, we need to stop them from getting the Infinity Stone. Like it was the same thing, but not as interesting to me. Suicide Squad, the first one. This is an interesting mismatch of magic with how they tried to tell the story. They tried to tell it as a kind of redemption arc for the people in the Suicide Squad, but then they matched a girl with a bat, a guy with a boomerang, a guy with crocodile skin, chick with katana, and dude with guns against somebody who can literally rip a new hole in our universe. Doesn't match up. And they didn't tell it as an underdog story. They focused on the individual characters and tried to do the redemption, at which point the magic was just getting in the way, which hurts me to say because I love magic. Like if they had shifted it, if you guys haven't seen it, it's frustrating. The one person that could have made this work is not in this screenshot, and it is Pyro. Because he was the one who was able to use his own magic to stand up against it at the end. And if they had focused on that and had his redemption arc, anyway, I'm not going to get into a whole diagnosis of this. I think you get where I'm going. It damaged some of the story for me. There were a lot of other things that were wrong with that movie. Again, you're allowed to like it. I have my own trash that I like. It's fine. Now, I know this is a lot, but seriously, don't panic. Because we're writers, we can make anything happen, and we can do this. It's a lot to consider. There is more leeway than you might think. You don't have to be perfect. We never have to be perfect. Okay, I think about half of you were in the presentation yesterday, so I'm just going to really quickly go through these. These are the 7 stages I believe everybody goes through when building a magic system. There's inspiration, finding that core kernel of an idea that will spawn everything else. Everything will start growing around it when you have a good one, and it will happen fast when you have a good one. Idea generation is where you explore what your system could be. Bulk idea generation, it can be bad, it can be contradictory, it can be stupid, doesn't matter, you just need a lot of ideas. Alignment is where you explore what your system needs to be for your story and for what you're trying to do. Definition is where you dig into what your system can do, and I now realize I didn't update this slide. Stage 5 should be testing, where you then take what you need it to be, what you said it can do, and you start pushing the extremes. And you want to watch the God factors. The closer a character gets to being omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent, or having unlimited wealth, the closer they are to effectively being a god in your world, and they can cause plot problems. Not a guarantee, but it's a thing to watch. Once you have that and you found where things are broken or you don't like where it's headed, restrictions. Narrow it down and figure out what your system can't do. Then you iterate and you do it all again as much as you need until it works. So when we're trying to make our magic matter, it is all about alignment. We need to make sure it aligns in the ways we want it to. We need to understand how the magic factors into our other elements of our story. And you already know what they are: character, plot, setting, theme, and the genre elements. Now, when you connect it, when you are making the magic matter and you're tying it and aligning it with these pieces of your story, there's a couple ways that the magic can factor in and be a variable in terms of alignment. It can act as a positive factor, where it is a resource or a tool or an element, a thing to be used as they go through the story. It can be a negative factor, where it is a problem, an obstacle, or a pain point for an element of the story, whether that's a character, the plot, or whatever. It's holding things back. Now, these types of factors often trigger emotions in the reader, because if it's a tool, it's interesting and it's cool. A discovery is exciting. A new power is fascinating and empowering. The negative factors are frightening and frustrating, and that's how it can tie into all of that. And I'm going to go through some examples, so don't worry too much. It can also be an analogous factor, where it serves as a metaphor or manifestation of a concept or idea. That's what we're talking about in the Babadook. The monster is a metaphor for the mental health of the mother. And you can have that be any number of ways. It can be a metaphor for the economic system of your world. It can be a metaphor for the declining mental health of a character you have. In one of my books I wrote before I switched to really focusing on the nonfiction, the character's control over the powers was a direct correlation to her control and acceptance of her own ability to act on things. There's lots of ways that you can tie it in to the different elements of your story. It can even be a ticking clock, pushing it forward, that acts as a visual representation of what is going on. And it can be a driving factor, where this is the reason or the inciting incident. This is what is pushing things forward, because the magic is there and it is inducing action. Now, these types of factors can often connect to real-world issues. So, Dune, Arrakis, spice, oil, right? That one's pretty straightforward, but that's where it's easier to connect the world of your story to the world of your readers. So let's take a look at connecting magic to characters. Who has read the Sword of Truth series? One person, 3 people, okay. The Confessors have the power of love, but it's terrifying. because it's not just the, oh, I like you, this makes me happy. No, this is the, I will do anything for you, including murdering my family, gouging out my own eyes, and slitting my own throat. That kind of love. It is instantaneous. They're called the confessors because when they do it, the person they use it on will instantly confess and tell any information, any truth that they are asked, and their entire personality is overwritten. So that's both positive and negative. Very useful tool, very dangerous, very scary. It leads to a whole lot of different stuff between the characters, especially when you have two characters who want to be together, but one is a confessor. I have the Babadook, which we talked about a little bit. The monster is a negative factor that is standing in their way and providing danger. It's a driving factor that is forcing them to change and address situations and deal with things. And as I mentioned, it's a metaphor for the character's mental illness or the grief they are dealing with. The boggarts in Harry Potter, if anybody hasn't read Harry Potter, the boggarts are creatures that adapt to display your greatest fear. You can't get much more metaphorical than that. So specifically in this image, the boggart's showing itself as a moon to Lupin, who is a werewolf. Metaphor, character foreshadowing, all kinds of stuff there. Magic and plot. Again, the boggarts. It's metaphorical for the struggles and what we're going to see it's foreshadowing. It's helping us know what is going to be coming later in the book. Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The wardrobe, the story does not exist without the wardrobe. Them finding the wardrobe, the way the wardrobe works, that is why everything happens. Very common for portal fantasy. Whatever that portal element is, that is going to be a major driving factor in your plot. All right. Mistborn. The magic is a tool. It's an obstacle as well. Has anybody not read Mistborn? Couple. Okay. You should. It's very good. The Lord Ruler has extensive magical powers and is effectively immortal due to magic. And because he's the antagonist, that becomes a negative factor and an obstacle that the characters need to deal with. At the same time, they have their own magical powers that they can use to solve problems and figure things out and move forward, making it a positive factor for them. Magic and setting. Stargate and Star Trek. Without the tech, you would not have the space opera setting. I mean, if you don't have the Stargate, is it just Gate? I don't know. Just no SG, just one. Like, that's all they are. They're Team One. It's a core part of how the setting works and what makes it interesting. Fern Gully. Driving factor in the setting is also a metaphor for both our world, how humanity is treating the world, and that actually then goes in directly into the magic tied to theme and the genre elements, right? We're talking about metaphors of pollution and deforestation and taking care of nature and all of that, and the magic of Fern Gully and them and dealing with the antagonist, who I think is just Tex, I think. Is that what he is? Yeah. On the nose, but okay. It can't be more driving and metaphorical than that. Underworld. Love this series. The magic, it is the theme and it is the genre. Like, that's the thing with urban fantasy. You can't have urban fantasy without the fantasy part. And different genres, like, they have the different subjects to it, but it's something important to think about, is understanding that different genres do demand different parts and types of magic systems. So if you're missing that, you're going to be missing the mark with your story. Back to Harry Potter. Again, fantasy, wizard school. It's driving so much of what's going on. and it's serving as a metaphor for like growing up, dealing with different types of conflicts. It's a parallel and a support in so many different ways. Now, I hope everybody has a pencil and some paper because I didn't tell you at the beginning, but surprise exercise. I call this speed dating your magic. And what I want you guys to do is on 6 separate lines, label each line, one per line, character, plot, setting, theme, elemental genre, and magic. Oh wow, that's really hard to read up there. I apologize. Standard things: character, plot, setting, theme, elemental genre, and magic. Now, think about your current story. Which of those 6 things is your favorite right now? What are you most interested in? Now, what we're going to do is we're going to start with the one you're most interested in, and I'm going to spend 1 minute per element, and you need to write down a single sentence capturing your favorite part of that element. So scratch that. You're not going to start with your favorite. I'm going to walk you through it. So you want to capture, for character, is it a character moment? Is it a part of their backstory? Is it a specific betrayal? Is it a conflict? What is it that is most fascinating to you? Is it more metaphorical of I'm interested in these character personalities interacting? What is it? So you guys have a minute for character starting now. All right, you've got 10 more seconds, but if you're ready, you can move on to plot. Same thing. What are you most interested in? Is it the conflict? Is it a turning point? Is it a revelation? Is it some other specific aspect of how things are going to tie together? Go ahead and spend a minute on that. Thirty seconds. Next is going to be the setting. Same deal. Specific location, a nation, a point of interaction between the characters, a point of danger, a creature, whatever it is, write it down. And if you don't have something to write, I hope you're doing it in your head. It'll be a little harder, but hopefully it's still helpful. Next up is theme. So are you interested in exploring children seeing problems in a new light? Is it standard good versus evil? Is it talking about the nuances of gray and how gray can turn to black in terms of the spectrum of good and evil? Is it understanding whether things are worth the cost? What is it you want to look at? And what is it that has you most excited to tell this story? Next are the genre elements. So, are you after the action adventure part? Are you wanting quirky character dialogue? Do you want animal companions? Do you want body horror? Do you want moments of existential dread? Do you want deep love and connection? Do you want family? Understanding what those are and how they tie into the genres you're looking at. And you can pull from multiple things because you can be targeting primarily fantasy, but still include elements of specific types of horror, such as the feeling of being hunted or not knowing what the enemy is capable of. There's a lot you can do. So just pick 2 to 3 of your favorite, or if you can, phrase it in a single sentence. This one is a little weird. And I've already talked through the 30-second mark, so. And finally, the magic itself. If you have it, this is where your seed crystal goes. If you don't, just write down the coolest thing about your magic that you are most excited about. Okay, now for part 2. We're going to start back at the top again. And now what we want to do is we're going to spend just 1 minute, and I want you to write down any thoughts you have on how the magic can connect to that specific element of your story. So we'll start with character. You know what your favorite part is of your magic. How can you connect your favorite part of the magic to the favorite part of your characters? And remember the types of factors, bonus points if you can be like, I want it to be a positive factor for the characters, or a negative factor, or a metaphorical factor. But we're going to go through one at a time, a minute for each, starting now with character. And I may actually push a little faster so that we can have more time for Q&A. All right, go ahead and move on to plot. If you didn't have something for character, that's okay. Just keep moving. Setting. So does the magic lead to a caste system within the world? Are there guilds formed to take advantage of it? Is industry built around the magic? Are people ostracized because of it? How does it factor into the world? Are there various locations where magic is amplified or dampened? Any cool thing you can think of how it can connect to your setting. Theme. And finally, elemental genre or genre elements. And there you go. You just had a speed date with your magic system. Hopefully that has been helpful. I know the different factors can be confusing. It's one of the things I'm trying to work on, being better at articulating and explaining. But I hope this has been interesting and you've been able to see some of how this can connect and why it's important. Just a little bit more about me. You can find me on my website or on YouTube as The Magic Engineer. I'm going to skip over the selling real quick. There's one book. There's free stuff you can get on my site. I'll leave that link up there if you want the free worksheets. Or you can take a picture. I can circle back. And then blueprint. Okay. More sales stuff. Okay. The important thing. I am going to be doing a live Q&A on YouTube next Saturday on the 18th. What I've started trying to do, because video editing takes a lot, is I do a live session where I have a topic and I talk about it a little bit less organized than I did today, and then we end with a Q&A. So if you have questions from today or tomorrow or yesterday or even from the presentation then, happy to have you there. You can learn more about that on my Patreon, but, so you guys can get a picture of that. But I really do want to thank you guys again for showing up so early. So thank you for listening. And no matter what happens, I want you to make sure that you keep writing and stay awesome. And now we can go to questions. Please do go to the mic. And we've got about 10 minutes. All right, so it was perfect and there's no confusion whatsoever. Excellent, excellent. Yes.
Question about, this is kind of hard for me to understand, but how do you build magic in your story? Like, do you start simple and build it as a character discovers their magic? Is that on?
Okay, so the question was, how do you build the magic in the story? Are you talking about how do you teach it to the readers? Okay, because there's two separate questions there. Teaching it to the readers. Teach what is necessary and what makes sense at the time. Don't just go off on tangents, but if it makes sense for somebody to ask questions and for people to delve into it, then you can delve into it. Don't info dump. Make sure it is timely and makes sense. In terms of making it part of your building process, that is going to depend on who you are. I can build a magic system first. Not everybody can. Some people need an outline first. Some people need a full first draft first. Some people need character bios before they can do it. It varies. So when I said think of what your favorite element is for your story, that's a great place to start. If you're struggling with the magic, go back to your favorite part of the story overall, develop that further, and then try the magic again. Especially with this exercise, now that you know ways you want to make it connect, that gives you a building point to grow from. Any other questions? Okay, I was going to say, is it just overload? Is that all this is? That's fair.
So this is somewhat of a follow-up to my question yesterday. So I had mentioned that I have a baseline set of assumptions that the point of view characters have, which turns out to be completely wrong. And we talked about how, okay, create your baseline assumptions almost as if you're creating two different magic systems, the real magic system and where the point of view characters are starting from.
Right.
Do you basically work both of those out separately?
Me personally, what I would do is I would start with the real one and then figure out what I wanted the false information to be and work backwards into what they think it is.
Yeah.
Sorry. The question was if you have a system where they have wrong information and then there's the real system, do you build them as two separate systems or not? That's what I was saying. I personally would start with the real and then back into the other one. It seems I have to talk straight into the mic. I can't even keep eye contact. This is stupid.
No worries, I'm ugly anyway, but
That's okay. This one is.
So, and one of the things that I'm looking at is the real system is actually more scientific. And to your point, Bradbury says any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic.
Arthur C. Clarke, yeah.
Yeah.
Different Clarke, but yeah.
Anyway. And I don't know how much, I want to build out the science of it, but I don't know how much I really want to reveal because it's a fantasy setting.
Okay. So shoot me an email and we can talk.
Bigger conversation.
Yes, yeah.
So more of a question about preference. Do you like hard magic systems, soft magic systems, or somewhere in between?
My favorite tends to be rational magic systems, where I can extrapolate from what has been shown. I do like all of them. Those tend to be where I have the most fun, because I can daydream and brainstorm outside of the story a little better.
They give you flexibility, basically.
I like pattern thinking, and I like problem solving, and rational magic is what lets you do that best, so that's why I like that best. They all have their place. There is no best magic system, but in terms of my favorite, it is rational.
We have a question from a Facebook user. She's asking how you select your limits for your magic.
Okay, every time I'm like, I'm not going to shill, and then you guys ask questions that are like right on point for it. So restrictions may apply is where you could start. It is just an ebook. It's 15 exercises to help you identify where you need limitations and help you build them. I mentioned yesterday, I call them the 3 C's. They are cost, consequences, and countermeasures. Cost is something you must give or pay or sacrifice to perform the magic. Consequence is something that happens as a result of performing the magic. And countermeasure is something external to the magic that is used or developed to interfere with or block the magic. Those are kind of the main 3 playgrounds you can mess with. You can change what the cost is. You can make it more severe, more rare, more expensive, more extreme. The consequences can be more extreme. Like, I would focus on those three and think about that and see what you come up with. Oh, and I didn't repeat the question. The question was, where would you start to come up with restrictions?
So as you develop a series, the character often gets more and more buff. What are tricks that you use to avoid the problems with power creep?
Yes, the DBZ effect. So I'm going to talk about this a little bit more tomorrow in the Lit RPG talk if I have time. But one of the best things you can do is your early testing and make sure you understand what the scopes are. And it's even better if you can foreshadow what the limits are before your characters get there. Problem with DBZ is we are told over and over and over again, this is the pinnacle. Just kidding, this is the pinnacle. Just kidding, this is really the pinnacle though. And then there's pinnacle 3 and 4. Like, if they had foreshadowed any of that, it would have worked better.
Great presentation, thanks. And not a promo, but I did just order Magic System Blueprint on Amazon. But it's perfect timing for me. I'm wondering about, we often cross between film and TV and movies and books when we're talking about themes like this. Have you seen or do you notice any differences between the two and how magic is developed or presented?
Yes. So the question was if there's a difference between how magic is presented and developed in books and shows as opposed to books. Or sorry, movies and shows as opposed to books. Visual mediums have more visual effects and focus less on character feeling. It's just like with the narration, where we can get in the characters' heads. Same thing, we can feel what the magic is like in books. Can't in movies. We can see how awesome it looks in movies better than we can in books. Graphic novels kind of bridge that gap in the middle. So that's kind of where some of the strengths and weaknesses lie. In terms of developing paths, there's a lot of the same problems in both.
So a bit of a fun question, since it was power creep was mentioned. Who do you think does it worse, Bleach or DBZ?
Well, shame mark on my record. I haven't read Bleach. So I'm going to have to say DBZ. Any other questions? We have a couple minutes.
So my question is, when you're attaching you're creating your magic system and you're trying to attach it to your different story elements, how do you handle magic in a setting and how that magic affects society?
Okay, big question with 90 seconds to answer. How do you handle tying the magic to the setting? That's a world building thing that is a whole fun can of worms. So at one point, Mary Robinette Kowal said, if you change one thing, it changes everything. Well, magic is one really big thing. So spend some time thinking about the scope of the influence, where it will reach, who would use it, and what it might impact, and start there. Don't change everything, because you don't have time. But think about what is most exciting to you. And I think we've got 30 seconds, so there's not enough. So yeah, nailed that, 60 seconds. So thank you, everybody.